Make sure you check out OwnBet.com, the #1 MMA sportsbook in the world. That's OwnBet.com, OHMBET.com. For Sunday's UFC Fight Night event, they have a super boost offer on Emil Mech. 20 times the money on him. If you're putting money down on Emil Mech, OwnBet.com is the place to check it out. Make sure you use the bonus code Fight Society and join now the biggest MMA sportsbook in the world. That's OwnBet.com, OHMBET.com, OwnBet.com. Check it out ahead of Sunday's UFC Fight Night card from St. Louis. Welcome back to the Fight Society podcast. I'm Damon Martin. He is Matt Brown. And Matt, you were a traveling man this week, so we're recording on a Friday as opposed to earlier in the week. You're out in L.A. How was Los Angeles?
Very good. Got to hang out with my man Chuck Liddell, the legendary Chuck Liddell. So that made my week for me. Don't need anything else. My life's pretty much fulfilled.
How was Chuck's a super nice guy. I've known Chuck for a lot of years. How was it? Like, was that the first time you really met him?
First time I ever met him.
Really?
Yeah. Funny enough, I met literally every other UFC star I'd ever want to meet. Chuck was like the last one, but he's always, from the beginning, from day one, he was always my number one, like my top guy that I was, looked up to in terms of, inspiration and looking up to him and just wanting to be like that guy. I got so much from watching his fights and kind of tried to mold my style after his to some extent.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to talk to him a little bit, or was it just a quick meeting, or?
We hung out for a little while and we started talking some MMA. Whenever he showed me some techniques that I always wanted to learn from him. That big right hand of his, I felt that a little bit. Not directly on the chin, just playing around with it. But, God, what a strong son of a bitch, man. So, I'm out there working with Muscle Farm, doing some stuff with them, trying to bring guys into the facility. Chuck is one of them. So, hopefully, we get to make this a good, long-lasting relationship.
Yeah, Chuck's a fountain of knowledge. It's kind of funny. People kind of forget. That guy's probably forgotten more about MMA than most people know about the sport.
Fact, he's one of the original pioneers, right? So I think he was probably the first guy that kind of did the sprawl and brawl and did it well and did it right and made it, did it at a championship level. And man, he took it, so he took that elevator to the roof. So
he's kind of the guy in a way, I always think of Frank Shamrock, but Chuck's kind of the way too, where it's he bridged the gap between the old school UFC style where it was wrestler versus kickboxer, boxer versus whatever, kind of bridged that gap into what we know as modern mixed martial arts. It was Chuck, Randy Couture. I always say Frank Shamrock was one of the first guys to really integrate everything into his art. But Chuck was one of those guys because when Chuck, if you remember Chuck's first fight in the UFC, he was a wrestler. People forget he came in with wrestling shoes on. He was a wrestler, and then he developed into this dominant kickboxer. But he was one of those first guys that kind of bridged the gap between those kind of two time periods in the sport.
I agree, and I think I put Tito in there too.
Tito.
And I think the biggest thing with him was he was the first, to me, him and the Tito and Chuck fights were the first ones that you were truly anticipating for months, couldn't wait, just totally stoked. The trash talk, obviously, that Tito did, and Chuck's persona, and just everything added up. That we don't get that pure of fights anymore, or in terms of the big top fights anymore. There's a lot of manufactured, and there was something special about that time period, and especially those two guys. And I think I guess Tito and Ken were kind of a big thing, but Tito and Chuck, those were two championship level guys, long lasting, sustainable careers, and just championship level guys that were, man, you know, how much bigger of a fight could it have been back then? I don't think it could have been any bigger. Maybe Liddell Couture.
I don't think well, for a funny story, Chuck Tito 1 was my first UFC event I ever attended, UFC 47.
Nice.
That was the first live fight I ever went to. First UFC fight was UFC 47.
That's hilarious. That was my first one was UFC 48 when and Chuck fought Vernon White.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and Vitor Belfort was the main event.
That's right. Yeah, because I remember we were going out to Vegas, and you know, I was like, I wanted, like, you know, I've been a UFC fan for years, but I'd never gone to a show. And when Chuck was fighting Tito, I was like, this is it. I'm flying to Vegas. Like, I'm going to this fight. And it was at Mandalay Bay, and I actually went to Tito's after party that night because we couldn't get into Chuck's. So went to Tito's after party, and Tito showed up, and like, you know, he was all busted up. His eye was busted up. But it was one of the like moments when I grew to appreciate Tito for like how much he loves his fans, because he stood there and took pictures with everybody that was at his after party, even if he lost the fight. You know what I mean? Obviously, it was a big rivalry fight. Stood there and took pictures with everybody, and I have met. Obviously, I've known Chuck for a lot of years. Like, same way, nice guy. I remember running. Just always, you know, always there for the fans like that. But that was the same night. That was the night when Nick Diaz knocked out Robbie Lawler. That was that UFC 47 event.
Ain't that so crazy? Because at the UFC 48 was Nick Diaz fought Cara Parisian. You know, how often do you even see guys fight on two UFCs? Maybe it wasn't Cara Parisian. I think it was, because he lost kind of a decision that he thought he won. Nick was walking around in the crowd, and you know, back then, I mean, you know, I didn't think there was any real chance of me ever being in the UFC. Of course, I was training and wanted to, but you know, that's funny because you know, it was such a small group back then. You know, Nick's walking around the crowd and he's not getting swarmed.
Yeah.
You know, there's people just saying, "Hey, what's up, man?" Like, I talked to him, you know, for probably 10 seconds or something. I just remember him saying that, you know, he didn't really even care. He was just like, I only get half of my money now. That was like the only thing that pissed him off. But yeah, and I ended up at Couture's after party, which was like the coolest thing that ever happened to me in my life at the time. I just ran into these guys at the elevator in Mandalay Bay. They had Randy Couture shirts on. I said, "So, hey, what are you guys? You guys went to the UFC fights. What's up?" You know? They said, "Oh yeah, we're going to Couture's after party. You want to go?" And you know, fuck yeah, I want to go. You know, penthouse suite in the Mandalay Bay. I go up there. Fucking Dan Henderson's there. Matt Lindland's there. You know, all of the Team Quest guys. You know, this is when Dan was in Pride. I think he had just fought Vanderlei, or for whatever reason, I just remember that fight. And, you know, I'm like, what the hell is this? And I'm calling my people I was out there in Vegas with. I'm calling them like, dude, I'm at Randy Couture's after party. They're like, we don't fucking care, bro. Like, we're at the club trying to pick up girls. You know, you can imagine, right? Like how much different of a world it would be today, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like, those days, man. I remember because that event, I'll never forget. It was Boss Rutan's birthday weekend, and he was walking around in the crowd, and like, most people didn't know Boss Rutan, but I was like, oh my god, it's Boss Rutan. I was like, holy crap, it's Boss Rutan. He was walking around wearing a crown on his head with his birthday, like celebrating his birthday, and I remember seeing him, and I freaked out. I was like, oh my god, it's Boss Rutan. And I met so many people that weekend. Like, it was the same thing. Like, you walk around and you see these people, and it's like, you know, rock stars to you and me, but then like the rest of the crowd was like, you know, who is this guy? You know what I mean? But like, I remember I ran into like so many like big people there, and I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm in the same room. And I remember, funny enough, so we went to Tito's after party, and that was the first time I'd ever met Frank Mir, and Frank was getting ready to fight Tim Sylvia for the title. And I met Frank, and I was a huge fan of Frank at the time. I still am. Frank's a, you know, great guy. Met him. I was a huge jiu-jitsu guy at the time. I loved jiu-jitsu. Like, I'd fallen in love with jiu-jitsu. And so Frank was like, you know, the embodiment of jiu-jitsu at that time. Like, he was an American guy who was like incredible with submissions. And so I met him, and super nice guy, sat there and chatted with me for like 10 minutes. Really, really nice guy. And then he's like, well, I got to take off, man. We're doing this. And he was talking to a group of us. And he tells us that he had work that night, and we're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he was a bouncer at Spearmint Rhino, the strip club in Vegas. But he was leaving the after party because he had to go bounce at the strip club. And he was literally like 2 months away from fighting Tim Sylvia for the title.
Yeah, so yeah, what a different world it is today, huh?
Yeah,
That's
like
those two, because the third heavyweight at that time was Andrei Arlovsky, and I was in where I was sitting. Andre was 2 or 3 rows down from me. I was sitting by myself. Like, the people that went with me to Vegas didn't even want to spend the money to go to the UFC. It was only $75 for the tickets I got. They weren't the best tickets, but $75. And Arlovsky's sitting 2 rows from me, and I'm like, "Fucking Arlovsky!" Like, literally, the people in the crowd didn't know who he was. The people sitting right beside, right behind me. So, those people were there for the blood sport, right? They were there for just the UFC, the blood sport, maybe for Couture or Belfort, because Couture got a pretty good ovation. But, it wasn't people weren't involved. They didn't know what was going on. Me and you were probably on the underground every day, just just reading, any, or a Full Contact Fighter or MMA Weekly, just getting any knowledge that we can. The internet was so, so almost taboo back then,
Oh, I remember. I'll never forget. I got on a forum back then. I sat there because you get in these arguments with people, but like back then it wasn't about like trolling each other. Like, you were literally just like talking about the sport. Like now it's a lot of trolling. It's a lot of that kind of stuff. But like back then, I remember there was a thread. And I can't remember if it was on the Underground or if it was on MMA Weekly. But like there was a thread where I went back and forth with people for like 5 pages, arguing that I said Frank Mir was going to tap out Tim Sylvia, and everyone's like, Tim Sylvia's going to knock him out. He just knocked out Rico Rodriguez, who was another jiu-jitsu guy. Then I remember going back and forth with these guys for like 5 pages, bitching about how I thought Frank Mir was going to win. Then I remember when Frank, snapped his arm. That was the infamous, like, where he popped his arm in the fight and Herb Dean stopped the fight. I remember going back in there and everyone's like, oh, and I was like the one person that picked him. I felt like so vindicated. I was like the one guy who picked Frank Mir. Like, those are the old days, man. That's how it was.
Those were the good old days. And then I'm sure you remember when the Underground was the only way we even got our information, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't see it on pay-per-view no more. And there wasn't no way to get any information whatsoever. We go on the Underground was my spot. I remember MMA Weekly, and there was the occasional like MySpace group. I remember that where you'd have 10, 15 people from across the country in this MySpace group that was about UFC. And there were legit conversations. I remember I used to argue that was part of one of the reasons that I was so stoked to finally fight Diego Sanchez, because I remember the same type of argument. I said Diego was going to be world champion at 155. He was going to beat BJ Penn. And, everybody's like, you're retarded. And, I didn't, he didn't come too far from it. He got close, but, it was a legit argument at the time.
Nah, there was a day when Diego Sanchez won the first season of The Ultimate Fighter. I was like, that guy's going to be a welterweight champion. I was like, man, if someone can challenge George St. Pierre, Diego's got the style. He's a wrestler, real great cardio. Submissions are great. I always thought he would be a guy that could eventually challenge for the welterweight title back then. So, yeah, that was those days when you could argue with people. It didn't just turn into one, like, just one big insult fest, or, like, people weren't trolling. Like, it was, like, legit, because there was only, like, 200 people who legitimately knew, what the Underground was or what these forums were. And so it's just like you were always like going back and forth with each other on those forums.
Yeah, everybody wanted to kind of emerge as, like you said, you felt vindicated. We always wanted to emerge as the guy that called it. Like, I know more about these martial arts than you. And now I think over the years we've kind of realized, at least I have, considering how many fights I get wrong. I think we've realized just the randomness of this fucking sport, man. And just the there's so much to it. The statistics don't mean nothing. The all these fight matrix doesn't mean a damn. You could put everything. Paper just doesn't mean anything. You put it all together, and once those doors close, it all goes out the window.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I've always enjoyed about MMA is like, you can't, there's an unpredictability to MMA that you don't get with other sports. Like, don't get me wrong, if the Patriots are playing the Cleveland Browns in football, you got to pretty much assume the Patriots are going to win. Now, you may get an upset here or there, like randomly, but by and large, it's going to go that way. You can't. Even in fights that are considered mismatches. We see Holly Holm is like a 10-1 underdog to Ronda Rousey. You see underdogs all the time pull off these big wins, and I think that's what I love. I think that's what so many people love about MMA is the unpredictability about it. You can feel pretty good about a pick. Like I felt pretty good picking Khabib to beat Edson Barboza, but even in picking that fight, I was thinking, but if Edson, unloads one kick or stops that takedown, it could be a really bad night for Khabib. So you can't really say that about a lot of sports where it's that unpredictable.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's what when it comes down to it, you have these guys like George St. Pierre. He lost to Matt Serra, right? But the consistency over time, the John Jones of all, to me, is probably the top guy, right? And him or Demetrius, and going back and forth between guys like that, or Anderson in his prime, and that's why that's so amazing what they're doing, right? And these guys aren't fighting underdogs, right? They're fighting guys that are supposed to beat them, that are supposed to be able to beat them, that have the ability to beat them, that have shown, that have gotten to the point in fights where those odds, of them losing to the 10-1 underdog are significantly diminished, right? That's what MMA really comes down to, right? We always have that chance of losing to the underdog, but we want to make those odds as little as possible for that guy. And when you're consistently doing that, that's how these guys are they're consistent. And, I guess my point is that's what's very impressive about it. And the guys like John or GSP are doing it against guys where those odds are already, pretty much almost to none.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. And then when you see like those fights happen where like Rose Namajunas knocks out Joanna Jędrzejczyk, when you're just shocked, you know what I mean? It was like, oh my God, like, because Joanna seemed like she was going to be the next, John Jones, GSP, like dominant. What she did to Jessica Andrade, you're thinking, man, like, who's going to touch this girl? You know what I mean? And Rose comes out there and kind of shocks the world. Like, that's the
quick little plug here. I called that one.
You did call that one. You definitely did. But even at that, though, that's what I'm saying. Like, you picking that one is still considered an upset. Like, it wasn't, you felt like she was going to win, but it was definitely like Joanna was so good. You just kind of felt like, man, that's why when you get a dominant champion, it's like, like you just can't predict these things.
Can't predict it, but I think that goes back. A lot of my picks sometimes are based on sort of what we're talking about, where there's, Joanna has done a very good job of keeping those odds stacked in her favor very well. And you look at all these different aspects, and the aspect that I seen in her was her getting a little ahead of herself. And now those odds, you're giving that next person a little bit more of a chance, right?
Right.
And, you can't do that with Rose. You know what I mean? And, I think that's where I keep picking against Conor and keep getting proven wrong, because I keep thinking he's gotten ahead of himself. He's thought too much of himself, his ego. But I think he does an extremely good job that we don't see. I think that's why he kind of appears out of nowhere for a while, and then he goes into hiding. Because when he's in hiding, I think he's out there doing the work.
Yeah.
I think he's really putting it in as much as anybody is. And Floyd was kind of infamous for that. I know people inside of Floyd's camp that say you will not find a harder worker. There's not a possibility of you finding a harder worker. And, when he comes out of the shadows, out of the gym, he'll come out and talk shit with the best of them. But when he goes back into hiding, he puts in the work. And that's the part that, we have to kind of guess on.
Yeah. Well, you don't get to the point of where, like there are guys who we've seen in this sport who, become, rock stars, guys who, kind of start living the life and it affects them. You know what I mean? Like one guy in particular, I think that had that happen to him was Anthony Pettis. Like when Anthony Pettis beat Benson Henderson and then beat Gilbert Melendez, you felt like this is the next superstar of our sport. And then, suddenly started showing up at every presser with like sunglasses on, the nice suits. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you just kind of got the sense like he started living the life a little bit more than living the grind, if that makes sense. And he admitted it to me before his last fight. He said, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to, because, I was joking with Loper, who is not here today. I was joking with him over the phone the other day when, he's talking about, like, his own, like, growing up and, doing drugs and doing crazy shit. And I said, it's the same thing with, like, the NFL. When you hand a 19-year-old kid $10 million, you can't really be that surprised if 2 years later he's in a hotel room with an 8-ball of Coke and, and 10 hookers. Because you're just not ready for that level of responsibility of being handed $10 million and said, go out into the world and do as you will. That's why you get like parents and, you hope people are around these guys. But it's the same thing in the UFC. Like some people are not ready for that moment. But guys like Floyd and Conor, they talk a great game, but they're in there doing the work. They're in there grinding every day. You just don't see it, but they're doing it. And that's how they stay on top.
It is very impressive because the football players, I think, they get a lot more from a financial aspect. They don't necessarily get recognized when they walk into grocery stores, right?
Right.
Except for the top guys, right? But even the lowest guys are making a lot of money. And then there's the other side where the guys like me, right? Like I could get recognized at pretty much any grocery store. It's pretty common. But I don't necessarily make the money like a football player would. And then you got the guys like Conor, Floyd, and Ronda, where they get both of them. To be able to deal with that and move forward and continue to grind like that and continue to work is, I think, to me, it's extremely impressive. And I really admire that quality in those guys.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize like the pressure that comes along with being in that situation. Like when you become a Conor or a Ronda, and I know it's rare. I mean, even a Chuck Liddell for that matter, because I've been around Chuck before too, where it's like you give up so much of your life to be that person, to be that superstar. Like, you can't just go to a mall and like walk around anymore. Like you can't, you know what I mean? Like I remember when Randy Couture fought Tim Sylvia in Columbus, and he beat him. Now that at the time was still, the sport wasn't nearly what it is today. But I remember Randy coming back from the fight and he got mobbed. I mean, like absolutely mobbed by people. And there had to be 200 people trying to get at him, get pictures, get autographs. And like you give up a certain part of your life when you reach that level, and it never really comes back. I mean, yeah, at some point, you may be able to escape the spotlight a little bit, but there's a lot more that goes into like being in that position than just making a lot of money and being in the biggest fights. Like you give up a lot of your privacy, and that's tough, man. Like I said, like that's one weird thing. Like I always, like when people talk about celebrities, like I get it a little bit. I understand the money's nice. Like, I'm sure having $50 million in the bank is awesome, but you can't even go to a restaurant without like paparazzi stalking you, or everything. Like Conor, dude, that's why when that whole cartel story came out, the Irish cartel thing, I said it was bullshit right away, because in this day and age, in 2017 or 2018, Conor McGregor can't go anywhere without a billion photos and phones and people taking pictures. Like, you're going to tell me this guy's going to get into a bar fight and punch two people and no one's going to have a video of this in this day and age? Come on now.
That's a great point. There's a different level, when you're a Conor or a Floyd or guys like that. Yeah. It comes with, that's what we want though, right? When we're little kids, that's what we're dreaming about, man. And if you start bitching about it, that's your own fault.
Yeah.
That's what we dream about.
We were talking about this yesterday on Twitter. I don't know if you saw anything about Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou did their media conference call yesterday, but Stipe, and Stipe, you've trained with Stipe, so like, when the cameras aren't on, Stipe is like the most talkative, funny dude. Like, this guy's hilarious, but he's just not a big media guy, he's not a big interview guy, and someone said, because a lot of the questions Stipe was asked about, what do you think of Francis's power? What do you think about Francis's comments? A lot of his answers were, I don't care, like, it doesn't bother me, like, I just don't care. And somebody on Twitter said something like, if you wonder why Stipe is not like a transcendent superstar, he's not exactly putting forth the most effort, to do it. And I said, listen, to me, that's not right, because there's no perfect right or wrong answer about what creates a superstar, because I use Chuck Liddell as an example. Chuck was never that way. I mean, Chuck had a great rivalry with Tito, and he did kind of come out of himself for that, but do you remember anything Chuck said about Vitor Belfort, or said anything about Amar Sululev, or any of the other guys he fought, Murillo Bustamante? Like, you don't remember that. You just remember the performances. You remember Chuck was a fucking badass, you know what I mean? Like, there's no perfect right or wrong answer to what creates a star. Like, yes, Connor's an anomaly. Like, Connor's Connor. Like, you can't compare Connor to anybody else, but like GSP, he came along at the right time. Canada was there. Like, there's just no right or wrong answer.
And the fact is, Stipe can get to that level with this after. He hasn't done what other heavyweights haven't done yet. I think he will. I do think he's going to beat Ngannou, and I think he's going to be the greatest heavyweight champion in history. And I think he will transcend the sport. He's not going to do it on his personality, though. And I get why someone would say that, but like GSP or Chuck, like they didn't. I think Chuck was probably a little different. Like GSP did not transcend the sport based on his personality. He did it based on his performance, which was, again, consistent and dominant. Chuck, as much as he wasn't a shit talker, he was a man's man.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we all wanted to be like Chuck. You know what I'm saying? Like I mean, we could easily have a bumper sticker, "What would Chuck do?" And it would be very valid. Like, I would actually think about it. Like, what would Chuck Liddell do in this situation? What would Chuck say? What would Chuck think? What would Chuck feel? And it'd be legit, right? Like, he's a fucking man's man. Stipe can get there, I think, but he's got a long ways to go. He hasn't done what other heavyweights haven't done yet, right? Like, other guys have defended their title twice. I think that's where Stipe's at, right? And he's just going to have to do more than that. He knocks out Ngannou, I think that's going to be, or at least beats Ngannou. I think that's going to be a huge step forward, because now he's really going to get the respect that he deserves after that, I think. I
think there's 3 fights that Stipe can have that will take him to a whole other level. One is Ngannou, which I think he will win. I'm picking him to beat Ngannou. I think he will, and I think he'll do so dominantly. We'll break down the fight more next week, because obviously the fight's next week, but I think he's going to win that fight. Then I think it's beating Cain Velasquez. If Cain can come back, and I know there's a lot of questions about that, but I think everyone, you and I both recognize, if Cain was healthy, never got through, never got injured, never dealt with that, in my opinion, Cain would probably be the greatest heavyweight of all time. I mean, that dude was unbelievable at his best. So Cain, and then I think eventually, maybe it's a year down the line, maybe it's 2 years down the line, fighting John Jones. If he fights John Jones and beats John Jones, now you could argue at that point who is left, like, what do you have to do at that point? But those are the 3 fights that I don't care what you say. I don't need to hear anything from either guy. Just show me the fight. Like, I want to see Stipe against Cain, Stipe against John Jones. If he does those 3...
It's on Cain, speaking of. You got updates. What's going on?
His coach said he's going to come back this year. I talked to DC a couple weeks ago, and DC said, Cain's in the gym. He's helping DC get ready for Ozdemir. So he's in the gym. He's just taking his time coming back. So I've heard... later this year, like summertime maybe, late summer, something like that. So, he's healthy, he's training, so, I mean, that's a good sign.
I'm in agreement with you. I've been a big fan of Cain's for a long time, and I've been on the Cain train since the beginning, and felt that he has the ability to be the greatest of all time. Him and Stipe, I've known Stipe for a long time, and I knew that he was going to be a great heavyweight, but now I'd put him up there with the Cain, and that's the fight. Assuming they're both in their prime, both ready, that's the fight I want to see. I'm right there with you. I mean, assuming that he beats Ngannou, and the John Jones fight, I think is awesome. Would be a great thing, if John can keep his shit together long enough to get us to that point, and can reprove himself again for the umpteenth time, and we get this fight, and I don't personally put the John Jones fight in there because that's one John should lose because he's not a heavyweight. So, but I totally get where you're coming from, and yeah, let's see that, man. But I'm with you on the Cain one, number one. You got to beat Ngannou and you got to beat Cain.
Yeah, Cain was. I remember talking about going back years. I remember I was interviewing John Fitch like years ago. Like, this is probably going back 10 years at this point, or however long. It's maybe longer. I was interviewing John Fitch, and John told me, he's like, dude, we got this guy who's coming in. He's going to make his UFC debut soon. His name's Cain Velasquez. And I want to say he debuted on the GSP Sarah 2 card in Montreal, I think, because I was at that card. I remember John Fitch telling me, you got to keep an eye out for this guy, Cain Velasquez. He's going to be a champ. And when I looked him up, I remembered him from wrestling from Arizona State. Like, I remember that name. I was like, why do I know that name? And I remember that name. But John Fitch told me, he's like, dude, this guy is going to be unbelievable. And in terms of, like, talent, in terms of, like, what this guy did to people, in his prime, again, I know it's a lot of what-ifs because he's always dealt with injuries. But, dude, like, I love Fedor. I think I've mentioned my Fedor love on this show before. I love Fedor. A healthy Cain, a 100% healthy Cain, to me, is the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time. Now, that's not saying he's the most accomplished heavyweight fighter of all time. That's not the case. Fedor is obviously the most accomplished, and Stipe has a chance to surpass that. But man, in terms of talent, in terms of what this guy did, man, Cain was like playing a different game, man. Like he was on a different, like he was in the NFL and everyone else was playing like college football.
I'm about halfway there with you, maybe more. He had a lot of qualities about him, specifically his cardio, that you just don't see in heavyweights, really in any sport. I mean, even wrestling. I mean, you just don't see guys that can push a pace the way that Cain has done for so many times. But ultimately, I can only make that based off results too, though. And I have to look at it objectively and take away. So say with like a Mike Tyson, when people put him in the top 10 or whatever, I'd say, look, man, I get where you're coming from, but I got to look at it objectively and look at the results. Ultimately, in the end, 100 years from now, people are going to forget that Cain had the greatest cardio, and they're going to forget that he fought Verdun in Mexico City. They're going to see a W or an L, right? And unless you get to like a Mike Tyson mythical proportions, right, where people would just excuse whatever, like he lost because of cuss or this or that, right? And,
right.
So me, like I look at it objectively, right, and 100%. Win and loss, and that's what it ultimately comes down to. And I look at my own career the same way. I'm also a very harsh critic of myself, and I hear people a million times like, "Dude, you did so great," and I was like, "Hey, well, you lost, so I don't really fucking care," Or, I guess you be a harsh critic of yourself. Like they might say, "Hey, you won. Who cares?" And I'm like, "Well, but I didn't do this or this." So I guess either way, I guess that's different when you're looking at your own career. So probably.
You're right, because the thing with Cain is he does have big wins. You know what I mean? He has his 2 wins over Dos Santos when Dos Santos was the clear-cut number 2 guy in the world. Now we can sit here and go back and say Dos Santos has lost some fights since then, but Dos Santos at the time, Dos Santos and Cain were Dos Santos
was the number 1 guy at the time, right? Yeah. There was no number 1 behind Dos Santos. Like it was basically Dos Santos and then the rest of the heavyweights. So they're like, if it wasn't for Cain, Dos Santos would have been dominant champion, right? That was the consensus.
Yeah, so Cain has that on his record, but you're absolutely right. And the reason why I want to see the Stipe fight so much is because all the things that Cain did well is what Stipe does well. His conditioning's on point. He's a college wrestler. His boxing's amazing. Like all the ways that Cain dominated his opponents are things that Stipe does well. You know what I mean? So like that's why that's such a dream matchup for me, because Cain was a incredible wrestler. Cain's incredible cardio. Cain's incredible boxer. Well, guess what? Stipe does all those things too. How does that match up?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're right on with that. I'm down to see it. Man. I hope Cain comes back and does some great things, man. I hope he's getting healthy, and I hope things are going great for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those dream fights, and that's not to take away anything from Ngannou, because obviously Ngannou's a badass, and if Ngannou wins, I'd be just as excited to see how Cain would match up with a beast like Ngannou. You know what I mean? But
that's the thing, right? Is that Ngannou could be the thing down.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't know. I mean, like I said, that's why you have to have these fights.
That's why we have them. I lost you for a second there.
That's all right.
Is there a connection?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So, but that's why I want to see those matchups. That's why I said, like, as much, I am excited about Stipe and Ngannou. Like, this is a big challenge for him. And, don't get me wrong, Ngannou's a tough guy. Yes, I'm picking Stipe to win, but that doesn't mean I don't think Ngannou has a chance to win this fight. If Ngannou can swing that sledgehammer, he's got a chance to win a fight.
Fact. Yeah, because all he's got to do is touch you with it. But from what it seems so far, nobody's been able to take that power.
Yeah,
can take it. We'll see, right? We're going to find out. That's why we fight.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm looking forward to that matchup. Like I said, all the things that Francis does well. He's an incredible power puncher. He's really, really strong. I mean, the way he outmuscled Overeem was so surprising. Like when he just manhandled him in the clinch a little bit. It'll be interesting to see how Stipe approaches the fight. And like I said, the key to a power puncher, and we have a lot of power punchers in the sport, the key to a power puncher is landing that punch. What happens when you don't land that punch? You know what I mean? Like, that's what happened in a lot of ways. Like, Roy Nelson has one of the biggest, nastiest right hands in the history of the sport. But if you don't let him land that right hand, does he have answers for other things? And we saw so many times over, he didn't have an answer. You know what I mean? When guys would outwork him and just like Stipe did. Remember when Stipe fought Roy Nelson? He was a huge underdog. Remember that? Because that was after he fought Stefan Struve and lost. And then he took a short notice fight against Roy Nelson. And he went out there and dominated Roy. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't know. Make sure you check out OwnBet.com, the #1 MMA sports book in the world. That's OwnBet.com, OHMBET.com. For Sunday's UFC Fight Night event, they have a super boost offer on Emil Mech. 20 times the money on him. If you're putting money down on Emil Mech, OwnBet.com is the place to check it out. Make sure you use the bonus code Fight Society and join now the biggest MMA sportsbook in the world. That's OwnBet.com, OHMBET.com, OwnBet.com. Check it out ahead of Sunday's UFC Fight Night card from St. Louis.
Well, all right, we're going to talk about the upcoming fights this weekend.
Yeah, we got Jeremy Stevens, Ho Choi, obviously, Jessica Ai is returning to flyweight. You got Vitor Belfort's retirement fight.
Paige Van Zandt coming back.
Yeah, she's making her strawweight debut.
Yeah, Usman and Meek is a pretty big fight for the rankings there.
I don't know how you feel. I mean, I don't know how much you study these guys or anything, and I know he's in your division, but man, I'm a big fan of Kamaru Usman, man. I think this kid is a future contender, man. He's a scary dude, very well rounded. I think he's going to beat Emil Mech pretty handily, but I want to see Kamaru Usman against those top guys, because that's when you find out. That's when you find out how. I mean, do I think Kamaru Usman's legit? Absolutely. Do I think he's a contender? Absolutely. But you got to see it. I mean, that's how you find out. You got to see him fight. The top 4 or 5 guys in the world to know, is he legit?
Yeah, and I think this fight for him comes down to, not a lot of people are going to quit. If he loses the fight, that's just real bad for him, right?
Right.
Not a lot of people, I think, are picking to lose this fight. What they're looking for is how well does he perform in this fight? How well does he win the fight? He needs to finish. He needs to dominate, and that's what they're going to be looking for this fight, I think, because I think, yeah, of course I study the guys, and specifically in my division, and I think everybody probably sees Usman as a tough matchup. I mean, certainly there's nothing easy about fighting a guy, strong, good wrestler, good everywhere. So I think everybody's going to be looking to see how bad he beats Meek, and that's not counting out Meek either. I personally haven't seen enough of him to say, what he's capable of doing. I think, he's the guy who knocked out Polaris, which is that's, kind of his claim to fame. And I haven't seen a lot of, not that I remember anything that stuck out in the UFC. So we'll see about that. And then, Yeah, so then I guess next was Paige Van Zandt, Jessica Rose Clark. Paige is going to be, that's, I think they want her to win this fight, right?
It's a weird thing with Paige because I know Paige talked about, like, and I had this conversation with her when she, was going up to strawweight. When she got announced for the fight with Jessica I interviewed her, and she told me, like, how brutal the weight cut was for her to get down to strawweight. But she's one of those fighters, when I look at her and when I'm around her, she's not a big, like, she was never a big strawweight. Like, she was never the kind of, and I understand size is, like, deceptive. Like, you can't look at somebody immediately. So, I mean, you look at Darren Till, you would think he's a middleweight. I mean, the guy's freaking huge. You can't just judge a guy based on size. But when I look at Paige, I'm like, she was never a big strawweight. And maybe she wins this fight. I like Jessica Rose Clark very much. I know she's dealing, I'm sure you saw on Twitter, man, her house got robbed yesterday and all kinds of crazy shit. Like, that's some stuff to deal with on Fight Week that I wouldn't want to deal with. But maybe she wins this fight. I don't think she does. I think Jessica Rose Clark beats her. But if she does win, I mean, I understand there's levels to it, you know what I mean? But, like, I don't know that I like her chances even against, like, a Barb Honchak or a Lauren Murphy, like these big, physically strong wrestlers who are going to have, who are cutting from 135 versus going up from 115. Like, she's going to be giving up a lot of size to some of these fighters, and, man, that's tough.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And, yeah, she doesn't really necessarily fight like she would need to be the smaller person either.
Yeah. I mean, and Jessica Rose Clark, I mean, she's a scrappy fighter. I think stylistically she's a better matchup for Paige because she's not like a dominant striker or a dominant wrestler. She's just kind of like a scrappy, good fighter. But Jessica Rose Clark, I mean, she fought at 135. I mean, she fought Sarah Kaufman. She fought a lot of good fighters at 135 and held her own.
Yeah, so you're seeing the size difference here.
I'm seeing size and power as a big problem in this fight, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say I think Paige is, if she can get it to the ground, she's pretty good on the ground, it seems. Her getting it to the ground, I think, is going to be her best chance. And I think she could do very well there, personally.
Are you picking Paige? Come on now, let's go fight pick. Are you picking Paige?
I'm not making a pick in that fight. It's only because, I just don't know that much about Jessica Rose Clark. And I've watched her fight, but I'm not sure that I've seen enough to make a clear pick there. Now, we can do some other picks if you want. We got Belfort Hall.
What do you think about that one?
Boy, what a tough pick, huh? Especially, with Belfort, with Vitor calling this, this week, calling out as his retirement fight. So, I can only kind of draw parallels to my own, dealings situation. And I was kind of the opposite, when I first started getting into my last camp, when I was fighting Diego, getting into shape, I was like, fuck, man, like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, but then as I got closer to the fight, I was like, hell yeah, like, why would I want to retire? What am I doing? Fuck yeah, I don't care about retirement. I feeling great, This seems to be the opposite for Vitor, right? He never missed anything. Then a week before the fight, but that's not to say that it wasn't on his mind. So we'll see where that's at. So I'm going to go with Uriah, based mainly on the mental side of things. But if Vitor is 100% mentally there, I'm still going to pick Uriah, actually. So
yeah, I'm picking Uriah as well, and I don't think this is the end for Vitor. I'm pretty sure this is the last fight on his UFC contract. I think once his contract's up and he can go back on TRT or whatever, I think we're going to see him in Ryzen or Bellator or something. I just don't think it's really up, because he said this before the last fight. Remember, before Marquardt, he said he was going to retire, and he's like, oh yeah, he had a win. He's like, oh, I'll go again. I'm not done. And at the time, I remember, because I looked it up when I wrote the story about him saying he was retiring again. It said at the time, right after he fought Marquardt, he's like, I want to stick around for at least 5 more fights. Now suddenly he wants to retire again. I'm just like, Dude, I'm telling you right now, if he wins or he doesn't, get knocked out badly or something, like it ends up being a battle or whatever, I just have a hard time believing when he's out of contract and Ryzen comes calling and saying, hey, dude, you can juice to the tits all you want. And we go back to Vitor, the Vitor beating Luke Rockhold and the Vitor beating Michael Bisping. We're going to see him in Ryzen, dude. I'm telling you, if he can go back on TRT, that dude ain't going away.
Okay. I totally see where you're coming from, and I won't argue with you on that one bit. You know what? TRT Vitor is a hell of a Vitor to watch. So, if he's over in Japan and they know that it's going down like that, and the opponent he's fighting knows it's going down like that, then more power to him. Let's see it.
Yeah. What do you think about this main event, Ho Choi and Jeremy Stephens?
I got Stephens probably beating him pretty handedly. I think Stephens is looking better than he has in a while. I think his skills are, even as long as he's been around, I think he's just looking a lot better lately. I don't know. There's something about kind of his aura and the way that he has been coming into his fights. I think I know he's lost some tough decisions lately, but man, I think he's, really starting to come into his own. And I think the matchup-wise, I think Choi also gets suckered into a brawl really easy. Maybe is even the one doing the suckering. And you just don't want to do that with Jeremy Stephens. He's way too powerful, and you better be a very highly skilled guy to get into a brawl with him.
Yeah, Steven said something interesting to me. Well, not interesting. I knew this, but like the fact that he realized this, like everyone talks about the fight of the year that Ho Choi had with Cub Swanson, which was an amazing fight. But the one thing about that fight that a lot of people don't talk about is that Cub was pretty dominant for the biggest part of that fight. Choi just showed incredible toughness. Like his chin was insane because he took some big shots and he would not go away. And I kudos to him. But to me, that's not winning the fight as much as surviving the fight. And if he goes in there and starts just throwing a firefight with Jeremy Stephens again, that's a bad plan to go through. You know what I mean? Like I just don't know that that's the way you want to go because Stephens hits hard. He's we saw what he did against Gilbert Melendez. He's got leg kicks. He's actually worked on his leg kick game a little bit. Choi's tough, but man, I said this to a lot of people, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but as a fighter, I say that, telling somebody you have a great chin, like that's awesome, but it's it's almost like a backhanded compliment in a way, you know what I mean? It's like saying, yeah, you have a great chin, which means you get hit a shitload, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you had to prove that somehow, right?
Yeah, like,
I think for once, it may be a record that we're on the same page here on everything, and
so all of it's going to go the other way now.
Yeah, so we're just since I picked it, we'll probably be completely wrong.
So Vitor will win by first round knockout, and Ho Choi will probably submit Jeremy Stephens, some crazy shit like that.
That's the way it's looking. Yeah,
that's how it works. It's weird too. It's a Sunday night card. I always forget it's on Sunday night this week.
Yeah, yep, it sure is. And yes, so I'm right there with you. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to sound disparaging to Cub at all, but I think Jeremy probably has another level of power that Ho Choi would not be able to take that he was able to take with Cub. And I think we're on the same page. I think that's what it's going to come down to. And I think Jeremy's going to knock him out, actually. I think he's just really coming to his own. The other one I think is a amazing matchup on his card is Elkins and Michael Johnson.
It's a great fight. I was shocked that wasn't on the main card. That's a great fight.
Yeah, it is the headliner of the preliminary card, which they're both on Fox Sports 1, so it's not really a headliner, I guess. But man, who do you got there? Who do you take there? He also Alvin Cummings, which is a good fight, but who do you got?
If Johnson's weight cut goes well, and that's a big if because you just don't know, and I talked to Michael Johnson, he said he didn't do a test cut, so who knows? I mean, this is going to be his first time cutting to 145, so who knows? But if his weight cut goes well, I think he wins because I think he's got more punching power, a little bit better boxing, and I think he's got good enough wrestling to stop Elkins from just out-grinding him for 3 rounds. But if any of those things go wrong, meaning if Johnson's weight cut isn't great, or if he just looks, depleted at 145, any of those kind of things, Elkins is the wrong guy to fight because Elkins will grind the fuck out of you if you're not in 100%, perfect shape.
So who you got then? Don't give me the.
I'm gonna go with Michael Johnson, but like I said, I'm hedging my bets by saying I hope he goes through a good weight cut, but I'm picking Michael Johnson.
You're playing my old game. Always
I am the old Matt Brown.
Yeah, and I should probably do it more often, but I'm gonna go with Elkins there. I think I forgot that it was at 145. It makes it tough for Michael Johnson. He's not really a known cardio guy anyway. Probably the fastest guy at 55, one of the fastest at least.
Yeah.
His skill set lends itself to 55, I think. At 45, he's not going to be as fast. He's not going to be faster than anything Elkins has ever seen before. And, I think he could, my hedge will be, if Michael Johnson knocks him out early, I think he could very well do that, catch him with a good few combos, but he's not really a power guy like that. And I think you need that power to slow down Elkins over 3 rounds. I think you need the something to really make him think twice about coming forward so hard again. And I'm not sure if Michael has that or not. And, of course, we'll find out, but I'll lean towards Elkins. So we'll have one we're not in agreement on here, finally.
Are you excited to see Jessica Ai make her flyweight return? She's on the undercard too.
Absolutely, yeah. She's a good friend and great person, great fighter. I look forward to watching her win. And, I wouldn't, as my friend, I wouldn't pick against her if I thought she was going to lose. So,
I think people forget how people like to bag on Jessica because she lost 4 fights in a row, but you look at who she lost to for one. And then you also have to look at how I think people have such short-term memories of mixed martial arts, which kind of sucks. But when you look at Jessica, people don't remember how good she was at flyweight. Do you remember her standing submission on Zoila Frosto and Bellator when she used the head and arm choke and choked her out standing? Jessica was a badass at flyweight. She was a natural flyweight. Now she's back at flyweight. Now, does that mean that she's going to be champion or she's going to be the number one? I don't know, but I think I think it's a different Jessica Ai at 125 versus 135.
I'm right there with you, and we're going to find out. The weight cut again is going to be probably the determining factor. I think if she cuts the weight right, I don't think there's any way she loses, and I think she'd be a top 10 girl at that weight.
Yeah. So before we get out of here, I want to hit you on one other topic that came out last couple days. I think we talked about it on the show before, but it looks like Ronda Rousey is closing in on a deal with WWE. Did you see this? So what do you think? It looks like Ronda's pretty much done with fighting, crossing over to WWE. I know you're a big pro wrestling fan, Matt. I know you love it.
Hey, respect to her, man. Go out there, make that money, do your thing, do what you can do. Keep it up. And from what I understand, I know very little about pro wrestling. It's pretty tough on your body too. So, I hope that she's able to get in there and make some money and not get beat up too bad, not get hurt too bad. And I know a lot of those pro wrestlers get addicted to pain pills and things like that because of the pain they go through all the time. But so hopefully, I hope nothing but the best for her and Travis. I think they're good people, and I think that they'll, I hope the best for them.
Yeah, I say good luck to her, man. People like to rip on Ronda, which I don't think is right. Did she lose a couple times and maybe take her ball and go home? Sure, maybe, but who cares? She put her chips in the ring. She threw her chips down the table. She lost. She doesn't want to do it. Okay, I'm okay with that. I don't understand the venom that gets spewed towards Ronda so much because she lost a couple fights and walked away. It is what it is, man. It's Dana says it all the time. If you're just not into the sport, you shouldn't be in the sport. And if she's not into the sport now, then so be it. She's been a athlete since she was 12 years old, doing judo and doing Olympic competitions and went and did UFC for whatever 7, 8 years, whatever it was. So. She's and I did pro wrestling. I love pro wrestling. You know what I mean? If that's what she can do and she can stay athletic but doesn't have to take the same risks, meaning not getting knocked out by Amanda Nunes. Good for her, man. I don't see how anyone can't be happy for her doing something she loves. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand that concept. Like, we tell fighters you shouldn't fight anymore. Like, we're okay telling the fighter, man, you probably shouldn't fight anymore. Like, I don't want to see this guy take any more knockouts. But then because Ronda steps away after a couple losses, somehow she's like scared, or she doesn't want to fight. It's like, she doesn't want to fight. Who cares? Okay, good for her. She's got another career now. Good for her.
Yeah, I see both sides, to be honest. I mean, I guess we want to see the athletes be people we can look up to and lose with honor and win with honor. Ronda, when she was on her winning streak, I mean, she wasn't really nice about it. She wasn't respectful about it. And, if that worked for her, more power to her. Do what, whatever. I think naturally as human beings, whatever brings us success, we continue, to use to acquire more success. I think that's just sort of a natural thing we do. And I think that's kind of where she was at, was, she was intimidating a lot of people and being mean towards her opponents. And that brought her the success she got. And she wanted to continue that. And, I understand where some people are like, looking at her, like, look, now that you lost a couple of fights, now you're eating your words, and so I could see that, but she's still a human being, and she was playing a role, I think, when she was fighting, and I think as adults, I think we can look at that and hope the best for her as a human being, right? Like bring another person down doesn't bring you up. And there's no reason to ever wish harm on anyone other than if they have harmed you. So, I think there's people that this age of the internet and the social media, and people expect so much out of their athletes and expect them to be almost robotic and almost like they want you to fall into the mold that they created, not the mold that you created for your own life. So, Ronda, she was in a position that she was guaranteed to receive criticism no matter what she did, either way also. So I guess, again, for me, and I'm sure for you as a good person that's not sucked into this world of over criticism and kind of, worrying about other people's lives. I think we're going to agree again, which is a record for our show. We just hope that she has a great life in WWE, and if she doesn't ever fight again, that's her prerogative, and we're totally cool with that. And I'd like to see her fight again personally. I think that she has a lot left to do in the sport, and she could still do a lot of great things. But I can also understand her saying, look, I lost the title, and then I lost the fight to get back to the title. What the fuck? Well, I don't want to be number 5, number 6, number 3.
Yeah,
I totally get it.
Well, and I also think with Ronda, I think we probably talked about this, before when she lost. But I mean, Ronda, people always talk about comparing Ronda to other people. But the one thing she had in common with a guy like Mike Tyson was when Mike Tyson was on top of the world, and he was just killing people. When he finally got when he finally got rattled, when he finally got James when Buster Douglas, took him out, like that, when you talk about that confidence, that kind of cockiness that Ronda had, part of it was show, I'm sure, but also part of it was, that was part of her persona. Like, it built her up, like she felt invincible. And I think that made her do some of the things she did. Like, she felt invincible. Yeah. And then when Holly Holm kind of shattered that armor, you just she just never came back from that, and, like, she's not alone, you know what I mean? Like, in combat sports, Ronda's not the first person to get her, head knocked off, and she's just never the same. Like, there's no right or wrong answer. Like, some people get knocked out, and they come back, and they're better, they're motivated, they're all those things, and that's great. But not everyone's built the same.
Yeah, don't forget, like, she came back and lost to Amanda Nunes. You know, like, she didn't come back and lose to the number 10 girl, right?
Yeah. Like, she's just, she like I said, I get it. I understand because Ronda was so loud and so, I'm going to go undefeated and I can beat Floyd Mayweather and all this other crazy shit. I get it. I understand that. But, we also understand how hype works. We also understand how building the sport works. And we also understand how, listen, at the end of the day, she got out when she wanted to get out. And now she's going to do something else she loves. Good for her. I mean, like I said, I'm sure all of us would like to have a tenth of the money that Ronda made, you know what I mean? So, good for her. She's financially stable and she can leave the sport and be happy doing something else. Like, good for her. Like I said, I'm never going to fault somebody for doing something they love because, just because they didn't leave under our terms. Like, you don't get to tell people how they leave. They leave on their own terms.
Yeah, I think you're right on with that. Again, I mean, I think she came back and lost to Amanda Nunes.
Yeah.
May have lost to Amanda Nunes anyway, right? I actually think if she would have rematched Holly, she'd have had a better chance against Holly. There's a certain way you can beat Holly, right? Like there's a game plan that Ronda wasn't sticking to or wasn't able to implement that night, and Ronda has the skill set to beat Holly Holm. I think 100%. And now Holly's a great fighter in her own right, so I don't want to take nothing away from her, but I think that's the type of fight where whoever implements their game plan wins, right? Holly has a certain game plan, Ronda has a certain game plan. They fight 10 times, they could be 5-5. Amanda Nunes, on the other hand, I think it's far harder for Ronda to beat her. She came back to fight her, so let's not. I think Amanda Nunes is a worse matchup for Ronda personally, and my point being, she came back and lost to one of the best girls of all time. If she came back and lost to the number 5, number 10, 15 girl, then you say, okay, she needs to get out. She did her thing. But I get it when she just wants to be either number 1 or not at all. And that's, I can be a little empathetic being that I'm not too far away from the same a mentality, even though obviously her situation is completely different than mine. But I don't want to come back and be fighting, just to be fighting, number 20 and number 15 and guys like that. Like if I'm not going to be making a run for the title, I don't feel like I have a need to be there. And I think she has sort of a similar mentality, and she probably doesn't feel that she's going to beat Nunes right now. So why come back?
Well, you had that. I remember having that conversation when you talked about retiring. Like you said, I don't want to just come back to be here. You know what I mean? Like everyone has a different reason for fighting. I had this conversation with Chris Liddell years ago when he decided to retire, when he fought Dan Hardy and was going to retire. I asked him, I said, Chris, you won a bunch of bonuses and, you're always like a top 10 guy, but you never quite got to that title. You never got to fight Matt Hughes or George St. Pierre in their prime. But you were always there. You were always like one of the guys. And he's like, you know what? I'm fine with that. I just wanted to, I love the fight and I wanted to be there and I'm okay with my place in the sport. And you know what? I respect, and I know Chris, I respect the hell out of Chris, and that's for him. That's his guy. That's his path. That's what he wanted to do. You want to be a champion. You want to be the number 1 guy. And if you're not going to be the number 1 guy, that's why you said, I don't want to just come back to fight anybody. You and Chris Liddell are both legendary welterweights. You both had different paths. His path was, I just want to go out there, fight, make some money, have some fun. I enjoy doing it. I don't really care if I fight for a title. You want to be the best in the world. Same thing with Ronda. Maybe Ronda only wanted to be the best in the world. She wanted to retire undefeated. She wanted to do all these things. And when that went away, she doesn't want to come. And when I name a name, like she doesn't want to come back and fight the number 10 fighter as the co-main event on a UFC Fight Night card. That's just not what she's into. Like she wants to be the best. That's no longer attainable. Okay, I'm cool with her walking away.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly what you're saying exactly what I'm saying. Well, what a show! I mean, fucking agreed, man. Like maybe today should be our politics day. Maybe we'll come to an agreement on something.
Today's the day where we bust out politics, where you and I finally agree on something.
Yeah. So let's. Yes. Well, maybe actually, I take that back. Today we should certainly stay away with that. Let's get away while we're ahead, right?
Yeah, let's stop while we're ahead right now, while we actually agree on everything before we curse anymore else. Because if you and I are agreeing on something, then the world's probably about to undergo a real dramatic change somehow. So, Yeah, we'll be back next week though, because we got to break down UFC 220. We got to talk about Stipe and Ngannou. We got to talk about DC and Ozdemir. Both fights coming up next weekend. Going to be a great card. I can't wait for that one in Boston. It's going to be a good weekend in Boston. So we got to break that down, of course, and some other fights coming up. And obviously, there's always stuff going on. We'll break down what happened in these fights on Sunday night as well. So we'll get into all that next week.
Badass, man. Look forward to it.
All right, for Matt Brown, I'm Damon Martin. We will see you guys next week for another edition of the Fight Society podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you follow Matt on Twitter. He just got over 100,000 Twitter followers for his birthday. By the way, happy birthday. I know it was a couple days ago, but got over 100,000 followers for your birthday, so that worked out well. And so that was good.
Yeah, it was a cool coincidence. You know?
And
I think it went way over 100,000, actually. I should just tweet this every birthday.
Let me get 3,000 followers. This would be awesome. But so follow him at I Am The Immortal. Follow me at Damon Martin. And make sure you hashtag us Fight Society. If you got any questions for us for the podcast, make sure you do that on there. And we will see you guys next week for more Fight Society podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.